be very interesting times ahead, and that's for sure. And we're already seeing it start to play out since a while. And for those of you just jumping in now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the fact that Bitcoin beats bucks. Best, really. Bitcoin beats bucks. What does that mean? Well, I'm talking about Bitcoin versus the US dollar. Bitcoin compared to the greenback, and why little itty bitty is actually a better value as a store of value alone than the almighty dollar, upon which pretty much every other asset is pegged, at least in the US markets, and of course across many other markets as well, and even in markets where it's not the US dollar that's pegged against it. It's typically a fiat currency like the euro, the yen, the pound, the yuan, which itself, the euro, the yen, the pound, are indeed tied to the almighty dollar ever since the end of World War II, when all of the countries in the world pretty much agreed to keep their gold deposits in the gold treasury in New York, the gold vault in New York, because Europe had been decimated by World War II, more than decimated really, but decimated by World War II, and so keeping gold in the Federal Reserve Bank of New York was considered to be a safe place to keep those gold deposits. So every nation that had any significant amount of gold kept it there since the past 75 years or so. So 80 years, almost 80 years, that's 79 years. As a matter of law or practice, because they thought that their gold would be worth, whatever it would be in the future, and it would be best to have it be safe and kept safely under lock and key and armed guard in the vaults in the banks in New York. Now, that, as a matter of practice, gave the US dollar an unparalleled position as the top fiat currency in the world. And for the past nearly 80 years now, it has been the case that US dollar has been the top currency, the fiat currency, by which others are measured, right? Now here's the thing. Okay, that's all good and well, as long as you live in a world of fiat where nothing like crypto exists. But what happened when Bitcoin was invented? Well, to put it bluntly, once Bitcoin was invented and released into the wild of the public, well, everything changed. Right? You suddenly had a real asset class that was beginning to develop, as a increasingly popular device to hold. And that asset class has a limited amount, fixed amount that can be mined ever, and has an increasing value because of the perception that fixed amount, has much better characteristics than fiat currency, right? It's immutable, it's limited, right? It's uncensorable, right? You can store it easily, you can move it around easily, etc., etc. There's many different characteristics of it that are better. Because of those perceived values, because of the power of the network, because of all these different characteristics and traits of Bitcoin specifically, it has gone up significantly in value in the last 15 years since it was first launched. And since it was first launched, it used to be you could buy a Bitcoin for nothing, practically, right? Because they were literally, they cost you whatever they cost you in mining, on your laptop, which was a small amount of electricity, relatively, and you would get 50 Bitcoin per block mined. And so people were collecting them in the first 4 years at a rate of 50 per block, which is amazing when you think about people who've mined them and helped them since then and still have access to them. Unlike yours truly, who has lost many thousands of them, unfortunately, due to some incidents that happened in the earliest days. But hey, there you go, that's life. But what did happen is that the value of the Bitcoin blockchain, and specifically of the Bitcoin cryptocurrency, is that it has gone up in value like billions and billions of percent and hundreds of billions of percent compared to when it was effectively free. Okay? And even if you measure it from the time it first went onto exchanges, at the beginning of the index chart that you can look at on TradingView, it was like a penny or something. Even there, it's gone up many billions of percent. Okay? Now, what has the dollar done in those last 15 years? Well, the dollar has lost, again, gone down in purchasing power more than 99%. In fact, it's gone down more than 99% in just the last 10 years. So in the last 15 years, it's gone down more than, far more than 99%. Very close to 100% in terms of comparison to Bitcoin, right? So whereas you could buy a Bitcoin for practically nothing now, back then at the beginning, now it costs you, nearly $70,000 to buy just one. Right? If you had bought $70,000 worth of Bitcoin in the first year, you would have had, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of them. And you couldn't have even had all that. You couldn't have spent 70 grand in the first year because there weren't that many mined, right? And they weren't considered to be that valuable. But the point of this is that the purchasing power of the dollar has fallen significantly against Bitcoin. And for example, if you go to the grocery store and compare prices of typical grocery bills, let's say you spent, $100 to get food for, whatever number of days, 3, 4 days or a week 10 years ago. Now you practically have to spend twice that much, if not more, because of, the inflation of prices on food, right? And food, by the way, right, like groceries and rent, utilities, those things are actually not really considered when they talk about the cost of living, the consumer price index. Well, isn't that interesting? Because what are the things that people actually spend the most money on, right? It's their rent or mortgage, it's their utilities, and it's their food, right? So the actual things people spend, and of course, fuel, right? Fuel is part of utilities, fuel for your car, etc. So the things that actually people do spend money on every month that actually matter and are like the basic expenses of anyone in society, those aren't actually calculated in the cost of living index, the consumer price index, which is insane. And what that tells you is that yes, you can have a lagging indicator measurement of inflation, which is a lagging indicator, and economists will agree, yes, that is the number we go by, but they also acknowledge that it is not reflective of the real price of the cost of living and the rate of inflation, right? So actually inflation is significantly worse, not because of any particular administration, right? In the last 15 years, there's been American administrations on both sides of the aisle. There's been Democrats and there's been Republicans in office, right? In 2008, Barack Obama was president. As of 2016, Trump was president for 4 years, and now Biden's been president since 2021, since the last 3+ years. So it's not a matter of who's in office. The dollar, since its inception, the fiat dollar, has been losing value for a very simple reason. It's a fiat currency. They all die, right? They typically last about 28 years. The only reason the US dollar has lasted as long as it has is because, as I said earlier, pretty much every other currency in the world that's a fiat currency is pegged to it. It is the world reserve currency. It is the petrodollar, by which all, the majority of oil deals are conducted around the world. And of course, you have the only other fiat currency that's outlasted the dollar so far, which is the British pound, which has lasted a few hundred years. Well, that's lasted a few hundred years for a number of reasons. And in the last 100 years, since it's been pegged in the last 80 years to the US dollar, pretty much for the same reasons as all the other fiats, it too has lost a significant amount of purchasing power, right? Like you go to London or England, anywhere, and you buy, I don't know, a bottle of juice, right, or an ice cream or whatever. It's going to cost you a few pounds. 50 years ago, it would cost you some pence, right? Hundredths of a pound, right? It would cost you maybe half a pound or a quarter of a pound, or even less, because the pound was stronger then. So overall, what this says is that Bitcoin is a stronger store of value than fiat currency, and has been for 15 years. Since its inception, it's been getting stronger and stronger. And anybody who denies that just simply hasn't looked at the charts. Just look at the price of Bitcoin. You don't have to be a trader or an investor to do that. Look at the logarithmic price of Bitcoin versus dollars. And you tell me, does that look like the dollar is getting stronger than Bitcoin? No, obviously it isn't, right? It's the single most volatile asset, yes, which matters if you're a trader, right? Or an investor, but really mostly a trader. But it doesn't matter if you're just holding it. Because if you're holding it long term, any number of years, especially 4 or 5 or more, right? It has historically delivered great returns to those who hold it. And if you just keep holding it, mathematically it looks like it is going to keep delivering those returns. Now, it doesn't guarantee that it will. Something can happen. Things can change. Things do change, right? Crypto was born is the change from before. But until something else comes along that is actually better than that, and it's not that it's hard to imagine what could happen, but so far it hasn't happened. Bitcoin will continue to be a better store of value than fiat currency. Okay, that said, happy Bitcoining. See ya.